Now, what if I told you that Charlemagne, the literal father of Europe, never actually existed? I mean, what if he was nothing more than a clever piece of medieval propaganda? It sounds like the plot of some late-night conspiracy thriller, right? But for a growing number of historians and researchers, it is a haunting possibility that threatens to dismantle, well, everything we think we know about our past. Think about the implications for a second. If Charlemagne is a ghost, then the massive empire he built, the wars he supposedly fought, and the very foundation of Western civilization are all built on a void. See, we aren't just talking about one man being erased from the records here. We're talking about an entire 300-year gap in the human story, from roughly 614 to 911 AD, that might have been completely fabricated. Welcoming to the rabbit hole of the phantom time hypothesis. Explanatory, this theory suggests that the architects of our history books didn't just, misinterpret the facts. Firmly, they invented them. Animated, they stretched the timeline, padding the calendar with phantom years to legitimize their own power and fulfill those big religious prophecies. Mind blown. If this hypothesis holds true, the calendar on your phone is lying to you. Casual but firm, we aren't living in the 21st century. Conspiratorial? Instead, we are actually drifting somewhere in the late 1700s. Smirking? And the Dark Ages? Well, they were called dark not because of a lack of progress, but because they never happened at all. But why would anyone even do this? I mean, who has the power to delete 3 centuries of reality and replace them with a legend? Determined, today we're peeling back the layers of a 1,000-year-old cover-up. Excited, we're looking for the fingerprints left behind by the men who literally stole time itself. By the end of this investigation, you'll never look at a history textbook the same way again. Wisely, because sometimes the greatest secrets aren't buried in the ground. Softly, they're hidden right in plain sight, written in the very dates we take for granted. Let's take a look at the map of time, shall we? If you crack open a standard history textbook, you'll find a massive dusty corridor labeled the early Middle Ages. Intrigued? Specifically, we're looking at the years between 614 and 911 AD. Serious? For nearly 3 centuries, the world, or at least the world as we're told it existed, effectively went into a coma. In the centuries before this, the Roman Empire was a marvel of engineering, leaving behind massive stadiums, intricate plumbing, and millions of coins scattered across Europe. Enthusiastic, in the centuries after 9/11, we see the rise of the High Middle Ages, with soaring cathedrals and complex feudal systems. But in that 300-year window, it's like someone turned the lights off and, well, forgot to turn them back on. Archaeologists have a term for this. They call it a period of archaeological scarcity. But let's be real, that's just a polite way of saying they can't find anything. We're talking about a complete lack of evolution in pottery styles, no significant changes in the way people built their homes, and a bizarre, total disappearance of minted coins. I mean, if you were a merchant in 610 AD and you fell into a magical sleep for 300 years, you wake up in 911 AD and find that the world hadn't just slowed down, it had essentially stood still. The official narrative tells us this was a natural historical slump. We're told that after the fall of Rome, humanity just forgot how to build things. We forgot how to keep records. We forgot how to progress. Right? We've been conditioned to accept this black hole as a standard part of the human story.
But when you look at the sheer void of evidence, a different, much more unsettling question starts to emerge. Is it possible that we aren't looking at a period of stagnation at all? Is it possible that the reason we can't find any architecture, any coins, or any reliable records from these 300 years is because those 300 years never actually happened? Blow your mind. Think about the implications. If you remove those 3 centuries, the timeline snaps together perfectly. Excited. The late Roman era suddenly touches the early Romanesque period without a hitch. The Dark Ages disappear, and the math finally starts to make sense. But if that's true, it means we're living in a world where the very date on your smartphone is a lie. Awestruck. It means someone, somewhere, had the audacity to invent 3 centuries of phantom history and stitch them into our reality. And while the idea of inventing time sounds like something out of a science fiction novel, when you look at the people who were running the world back then, the motive becomes crystal clear. Because in the game of empires, time isn't just a measurement, it's a weapon. But to understand how they pulled it off, folks, we have to look at the 3 men who had everything to gain from rewriting the calendar. Enter our prime suspects. Well, more like the architects of this mystery. Holy Roman Emperor Otto III and Pope Sylvester II. You see, to understand the how, we first have to understand the why. Because in the medieval world, power wasn't just about how much land you owned. No, it was about your place in God's timeline. Now, Otto III wasn't exactly your typical monarch. He was young, intellectually brilliant, and, well, honestly, he was possessed by a singular, burning obsession, the restoration of the Roman Empire. But you see, he didn't just want to rule a kingdom. He wanted to rule at the most significant moment in human history. In the medieval mind, the year 1000 AD wasn't just a number, right? It was the chiliasm, the dawn of a new Christian millennium. There was this widespread belief that the world would undergo a massive spiritual transformation, or, and here's the kicker, perhaps even face the end of days. To be the emperor sitting on the throne when the clock struck 1000 was the ultimate prestige. It was a claim to divine legitimacy that, frankly, no one could challenge. The problem? Well, according to the actual timeline, Otto was actually living somewhere in the late 700s. And to a man with Otto's ego, that simply wouldn't do. This is where it gets wild. The phantom time hypothesis suggests that Otto and his close friend and mentor, Pope Sylvester II, who was, easily the most learned man of his age, decided to perform the ultimate administrative miracle. They didn't just change the law, they changed time itself. The theory posits that they conspired to fabricate 297 years of history, effectively fast-forwarding the world from the late 8th century straight into the year 1000. It was the ultimate power move. By rebranding their era, they weren't just kings of a struggling post-Roman Europe. They were the architects of the new millennium. I mean, they effectively gaslit the entire world, ensuring that every document, every coin, and every decree issued during their reign reflected this new, manufactured reality. They created a phantom bridge of 3 centuries just to elevate their own status to legendary proportions. But you see, you can't just skip 300 years without people noticing the gap. You have to fill that void with stories, right? You need heroes, villains, and epic battles to make the lie feel, well, lived in. And that brings us to the most suspicious part of this entire conspiracy. Because to make the lost 300 years believable, they had to invent a character so grand, so perfect, that he almost seems too good to be true. Look, If we're going to claim that 3 centuries of our history were simply made up, we need more than just a theory. I mean, we need receipts. And when you start looking for them, well, you realize the Dark Ages aren't just dark because we lack information. They're dark because the physical evidence simply isn't there. Let's start with the dirt, right? This is the first pillar of the mystery, the archaeological silence. Now, if you dig into the ground anywhere in Europe, you're going to find layers. You'll find Roman coins, pottery, the occasional foundation. Then you jump to the High Middle Ages and find the castles and cathedrals we all know. But in between, well, for that specific window from the year 614 to 911, the earth goes quiet. There is a disturbing lack of carbon-dated artifacts. We're talking about 300 years where it seems nobody built a house, dropped a coin, or even buried their trash. You see, in any other era of human history, we leave a footprint. But for these 3 centuries, it's like the entire population of Europe collectively decided to stop existing. But hey, maybe you think archaeology is a bit messy. Maybe you want something more precise. Well, it doesn't get more precise than the stars. This brings us to the second pillar, the calendar glitch. In 1582, Pope Gregory XIII realized the old Julian calendar was out of sync with the solar year. To fix it and bring the spring equinox back to where it belonged, he had to skip some days. Now, according to the math, if the calendar had been running since the time of Julius Caesar, the Pope should have skipped 13 days. But he didn't. He only skipped 10. Why? Because according to the mathematical alignment of the heavens, those extra 3 days, which represent roughly 297 years, never happened. The Pope wasn't making a mistake. He was correcting the timeline for the years that actually existed, inadvertently leaving us a breadcrumb trail that points to a massive chronological void.
So, if the archaeology is missing and the math is broken, where did all those stories about the 7th through 9th centuries come from, right? Enter the third pillar, the forgery factory. During the Middle Ages, you see, the only people who could read and write were tucked away in monasteries. These monks weren't just copying Bibles, they were the legal gatekeepers of the world. If a monastery wanted to claim a prime piece of land, they didn't just seize it. They would discover a document from a king 300 years prior that proved the land belonged to the church. We now know that the medieval era was rampant with document forgery. They were backdating royal lineages and land claims on an industrial scale, essentially writing a fictional past to secure a very real future. When you look at it all together, the empty earth, the missing days in the calendar, and the pens of the monks rewriting reality, you're forced to face a chilling realization. We've been taught to treat the written record as gospel. But in this era, the record is the only thing that exists. I mean, it makes you wonder. How can we trust a single name, date, or battle from a time period that only exists on parchment? But even if the monks were lying, they couldn't have pulled this off alone. To delete 300 years of history, you don't just need a few forged letters. You need the most powerful men on the planet to agree on the lie. And that leads us to a secret meeting that changed the world forever. Imagine a room lit only by the flickering glow of beeswax candles, tucked away in the heart of the Vatican. Right here, at the turn of what they claimed was the first millennium, Emperor Otto III and Pope Sylvester II sat across from one another. They weren't just rulers, they were architects.
But they weren't building cathedrals or fortresses. No, they were building a legacy out of thin air. Why would they do it? I mean, why manufacture 300 years of ghosts? Because in the Middle Ages, prestige was the ultimate currency. To rule in the year 1000, the very dawn of a new Christian age, was to be seen as a figure chosen by God himself to usher in the end of days. See, if the calendar said it was only the year 700, they were just another pair of ambitious men in a chaotic world. But by sliding the gears of time forward, by inventing 3 centuries of Carolingian glory and filling the void with phantom kings like a legendary version of Charlemagne, they became the masters of destiny. This is the chilling realization that changes everything. We used to think of history as a solid foundation, a series of cold, hard facts set in stone and etched into the soul of the world. But in reality, you see, history is more like a screenplay. It's edited, it's polished, and sometimes entire scenes are left on the cutting room floor just to make the protagonists look more divine. If 300 years can vanish into the so-called Dark Ages, with nothing but a few forged manuscripts to bridge the gap, well, we have to ask ourselves, is history a record of what happened? Or is it just a story written by the people who wanted to own the future? Our timeline is not a natural law. It's a fragile human construct, held together by the hope that the people who came before us were telling the truth. But if the phantom time hypothesis is right, I mean, think about it. We aren't living in the 21st century. We're barely scratching the surface of the 18th.
The past is a lot more fragile than you think, and the truth is often just the loudest voice left standing. So, does the timeline feel right to you? Or do those 3 centuries of silence feel like a hole in the story of humanity? Drop a comment below and let me know if you think we're living a fabrication. And hey, if you're ready to keep digging into the shadows of our past, make sure to subscribe. Stay curious, because the deeper you look, the more the story starts to unravel.